It's the Wilk Report. I'm Michael Wilk, coming to you from Cleveland, Ohio, with a report on the divorce from Disney and Marvel Studios by Sony Pictures. Now, this week has been really, it's been really, everyone's up in arms over this because people are flying back and forth, blaming Sony for being greedy. Others are blaming Disney for being too greedy. It really seems like Disney kind of screwed itself because Spider-Man, if you are not familiar with what's going on this week, Sony Pictures, which technically has the rights to make Spider-Man movies and leased those rights to Disney for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, has decided that Disney is asking for way too much money, and Sony, now that it's made some money with Venom and Into the Spider-Verse, wants to go ahead and essentially, reboot its own Spider-Man franchise, thus depriving Marvel Cinematic Universe of any future movies featuring Spider-Man and any related characters. So let's go ahead and break this down a bit. This is according to Complex.com, breaking down the Sony Marvel Studios Spider-Man deal and what went wrong. Sony has officially decided to take their ball and go home, as initially reported by Deadline and later confirmed by Variety. Sony is considering ending their agreement with Marvel Studios to share the Spider-Man character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Since its introduction in Captain America Civil War, the Tom Holland version of the character has appeared in 2 solo movies, Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home, and 2 Avengers movies, Infinity War and Endgame, spawning a new love and exciting creative period for one of Marvel's most beloved characters, but the deal was always on shaky ground and many wondered how long it would continue for. Before we move forward to untangle this twisted web that's been woven, perhaps it's helpful to go backward and figure out how we all got here to start, although that past is perhaps just as tangled as the present and future of the character. Alright, so, there was a time in the mid-90s that Marvel almost went away. They were basically broke. There were a bunch of bad investments. There was a bursting of the comic book publishing bubble, and basically they were trying to stay afloat. All right, and that included leveraging the rights of their characters to movie studios. So the plan was to sell the rights to get enough cash to keep going and then rake in the money of merchandise and comic book sales once the movies were released. Fox stepped in, purchasing the movie rights to the X-Men and Fantastic Four characters, and after years of litigation, Sony ended up with the rights to Spider-Man in 1999, and that lead to Sam Raimi directed... No, it's LED, L-E-D, not L-E-A-D, you fucking morons. Get your tenses right. L-E-D, lead, past tense. Jesus fucking Christ. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant on my part, but yeah, so basically, the Spider-Man trilogy of movies, that started in 2002 and ended in 2007 under Sam Raimi, that's basically how we got there. So, basically the deal was Sony had to produce a new Spider-Man movie every couple of years in order to retain the rights. So, once Sam Raimi's movies were over and done with, Sony went to reboot it, and that's how we got the 2012 Amazing Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, directed by Mark Webb. So, it did well for Sony. It grossed $757.9 million, according to Box Office Mojo, but, it's still under the gross that Spider-Man 3 made. So they tried again with the Amazing Spider-Man 2, and then only got $709 million. So, it really wasn't making the money that it needed to make in order to do that. So, basically, in order to have to prevent the rights from reverting, Sony kicked around the idea of a few different movie series to keep that sweet Spidey cash flowing. There was a Sinister Six movie, a Venom movie, which did get made and actually did pretty well at the box office. But yeah, so it was around this time that the emails from the Sony hack became public, and we all learned that Marvel Studios head Kevin Feige and Sony mega producer Amy Pascal had met about trying to bring the character into the MCU. That initial meeting didn't go well. Pascal is rumored to have thrown down a sandwich at Feige, but that didn't stop the two studios from eventually reaching an agreement in 2015 to share the character. And this is where it gets really interesting, because under the terms of this agreement, Sony would continue to pay for and have final creative control of any sort of future solo Spider-Man movies, but Marvel Studios would produce the film and serve as creative lead. This meant Kevin Feige and his expert team would have the chance to shape the tone and style, pick the cast, and integrate the character into the larger Marvel Cinematic Universe. So meanwhile, Sony could still develop the spin-offs, which, Venom, and now Jared Leto as Morbius, and the animated movies, including Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which was dumb. But anyway, it's a shrewd business decision, but, again, very controversial. So Homecoming's worldwide gross was $880.2 million, outperformed almost all the other Spider-Man movies on the big screen, save for Spider-Man 3. And then Far From Home just crossed $1 billion worldwide mark. So, yeah. And then, of course, Tom Holland actually has done pretty well. But that brings us to this week. So, according to the Deadline report, Disney and Sony haven't been able to settle on an agreement, and it's all come down to money. After the success of Far From Home, it's said that Disney wants to change the terms of the financing agreement, opting for a 50-50 split. Sony and Disney went splitsville on funds needed to make the film, as well as sharing the profits of the film 50-50. So basically what Disney is saying, okay, look, we want half. Okay? We want you to put up half, and we want half the profits. Now, as it stands, Marvel receives all profit from merchandise sold and roughly 5% cut of the profits from box office totals on the movie's first day of release. Sony, specifically senior management team executives Tom Rothman and Tony Vinciquerra, I don't know if I pronounced that right, apparently countered the deal should remain as is, but Disney didn't want to play ball. There also reportedly seems to be some concerns over Feige's current workload, not only overseeing Phase 4 and the various Disney Plus series, but the overall inclusion of the recently acquired Fox properties into the MCU. So basically, Complex.com is basically accusing both sides of having hubris. Sony apparently thinks they're capable of doing it themselves because, well, let's face it, Spider-Man and Into the Spider-Verse managed to do well in spite of all indications that both might flop. But, I think there's actually a little bit of reason for Sony to get confident, because really the reboot post-Sam Raimi, the reason that failed is because of Alex Klutzman. I mean, he basically ruined Sony's Spider-Man franchise. Basically like he ruins everything he touches. So, but here's the thing. It's speculated that the studio still has deals with Tom Holland and John Watts and producer Amy Pascal, so a lot of the core talent would still be in place even without Feige. However, as Deadline is quick to note, Feige is on an absolutely unprecedented run right now. Over the last decade, he's overseen 23 different movies, all without a single L. Every single Marvel Studios movie has opened in first place at the box office. Their total combined profit is close to $27 billion, nearly $2 billion of which comes from both of these MCU Spider-Man movies. And so, and of course, they believe the spin about Avengers Endgame being the highest grossing movie in box office history. Well, it's really not. And I'll embed my video on why it's not in the video in this one, but you can go watch that and see why Feige and Disney are full of shit on that. But there's really no comparison for that these movies are incredibly successful. So yeah, it would be beneficial for Sony to continue a relationship with Marvel Studios on Spider-Man. But right now, with the way that things are going, uh, it doesn't look good because Sony basically seems to want to screw over Marvel. And the Variety piece, according to Complex, says it's a little bit more optimistic from Variety about the chances of negotiations resuming, and Sony's attempting to downplay any reports of animosity. So, but here's the interesting thing. If you go to TMZ, Stan Lee's daughter is siding with Sony. The late Stan Lee, who co-created Spider-Man, would have been happy over the news that Sony pumped the brakes on giving Disney control of his character, according to his daughter. Sony's move to limit control over Spider-Man and potentially remove the superhero entirely from Disney's Marvel Cinematic Universe is one that was necessary and something Stan would have appreciated, so says his daughter, Joan Celia Lee. ICYMI reports surfaced Tuesday that Sony and Disney reached a standstill in negotiating Spidey's future under Disney's umbrella, including any Avengers spin-offs and sequels. Insiders told Deadline it was all about money. Disney wanted a 50-50 stake in Spider-Man related revenue and also wanted Marvel honcho Kevin Feige to be the guiding hand. Well, Sony was reportedly not too down with that. They own the rights to Spider-Man and until now had partnered with Disney to crank out these last couple of movies. That's all over now because, and actually the deal was for Spider-Man to appear in 5 movies, which he has. You had Captain America Civil War. You had Avengers Infinity War. You had Avengers Endgame. Then, of course, there's the 2 solo movies, Homecoming and Far From Home. That's 5 movies. That deal was ended. So then it became necessary to renegotiate Spider-Man's continued presence inside the MCU. Now, is how the Lees are feeling about all this, or how Stan felt and how JC feels about it. The quote here is, Marvel and Disney seeking total control of my father's creations must be checked and balanced by others who, while seeking to profit, have genuine respect for Stan Lee and his legacy, aka cameos don't cut it. She goes on, whether it's Sony or someone else's, the continued evolution of Stan's characters and his legacy deserves multiple points of view. When my father died, no one from Marvel or Disney reached out to me from day one. They have commoditized my father's work and never shown him or his legacy any respect or decency. Her parting shot, in the end, no one could have treated my father worse than Marvel and Disney executives. Ouch. So, there's a family connection here that says, Sony is more in the right than Disney. And honestly, I have to tend to concur with JC because, it seems like there's never really been an honest effort to show Stan Lee the respect that he deserved. I mean, they gave him cameos in the movies, but that was basically about it. Disney has made, again, according to Complex.com, $27 billion, including the not record-breaking Avengers Endgame. I mean, it doesn't mean it didn't make a lot of money. It did, but it just did not break the box office worldwide total. That record is still held entirely by Gone with the Wind. So, but still, it does seem like, Sony is basically balking at the idea of ceding more creative control over one of its biggest money-making properties, which is Spider-Man. And of course, they are riding high on the success of Venom and Into the Spider-Verse. So, on the one hand, you could accuse them of hubris, but I don't really think so. Because, I'm one of the people who actually doubted that Venom would do well at the box office. The rumors and reports that were coming in of behind the scenes drama of being, the lead actor being difficult to work with, just problems behind production. It indicated that, the movie might not do well, but, it pretty much exceeded everyone's expectations. Okay, and I honestly didn't think it would do well, but, it did. And then, of course, following up on Into the Spider-Verse, where you've got all these different incarnations from different points of the multiverse converging, again, A lot of us didn't think the movie was all that great. Uh, we thought, it was really kind of stupid the way it treated Peter Parker and, tried to cram all the versions of Spider-Man and even Spider-Gwen, which I think is a horrible idea, uh, into it. But, again, it still made money. So, yeah, Sony is a little bit justified in thinking it can go it alone this time. But honestly, I think they're probably biting off a little bit more than they can chew because after Alex Klutzman got through with the franchise, it was pretty much dead. So Disney really kind of came in and saved it. But again, Disney seems to be demanding a lot more from Sony that seems to be unreasonable. And again, according to JC Lee, Disney really disrespected Stan Lee and his memory and are really kind of asking for far too much. So, yeah, it seems like Disney really decided, okay, yeah, we're going to demand a lot more from Sony, but we're not really content to give anything back because we want Spider-Man under our control, which is kind of sort of understandable because, yeah, let's face it, Marvel Studios having Spider-Man in it, yeah, would be pretty nice. But again, you have to consider that Disney was asking for far too much out of Sony and not offering enough in return. Because Sony is trying to profit off of the other Spider-Man related characters without Spider-Man, and it knows it can't really do that. So, yeah, this is shaping up to be a really, really interesting fight. I will keep you updated as best I can. Until next time, this is Michael Wilk for the Wilk Report. If you like what you've heard and you want to hear more, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to receive notifications when we upload new content. And if you want to help support the channel, keep the lights on, help you bring you more content, head over to our Patreon or Subscribe Star page. We can't do this without you. Good night, everyone. Enjoy your weekend. I'm out.